Good afternoon. On behalf of the family, I want to welcome you. I know that they are very, very honored that you have come to celebrate Richard's life with them and to remember him. They've asked me to share with you that they will be observing Shiva today until 8 p.m., tomorrow from 3 to 5 and 6 to 8 at the home of Craig and Jenny Weintraub at 4100 Chagrin River Road in Moreland Hills. I'm sure you've worked out the parking, correct? All right, well, we'll find that out. And they ask for donations to be made to the Sun Coast Hospice, and you can access that information on their website at suncoasthospice.org. I lift my voice when all is dark. Into God's hands I place my heart. Piado of Kiruchi, I'm not afraid, Adonai li. I lift my eyes when all is night. When I need help, I seek God's light. Lo echsar Adonai roi, I'm not afraid, Adonai li. Piado of Kiruchi, I'm not afraid, Adonai li. Shiviti Adonai lenegdi tamid, ki mimini bal emot, lachen samach libi, v'yagel kvodi, af besari, yishkon lavetach. I have set the eternal always before me. God is at my side. I shall not be moved. Therefore does my heart exult and my soul rejoice. My being is secure. For you will not abandon me to death, nor let your faithful ones see destruction. You show me the path of life. Your presence brings fullness of joy. Enduring happiness is your gift. Death has taken our beloved Richard Weintraub. Our friends grieve in their darkened world. In their silence there is lamentation. In their tears there is loneliness. Lost in their sorrow may they find the presence of loving friends. Hear them, O God, and be with them. For Richard's love that united us in life, in which death cannot sever. For his companionship that we shared along life's path, and which continues through the tenderness of memory. For the gifts of his heart and his mind that brought us joy and happiness, and is now a precious remembrance. For all these and more, we give our thanks to God. Adonai roi lo echsar, binodeh sheyarbitzeni, על מי מנוחות ינהלני, נפשי ישובב ינחני, ומגלי צדק למען שמו. גם כי אלך בגצה למוות, לא ירא רע כי אתה עמדי, שבתך ומשענתך, המה ינחמוני. תערוך לפני שולחן נגד צורריי, דשנת ושמן ראשי כוסי רוויה, אך טוב וחסר ירדפוני כל ימי חיי, ושבתי בבית אדוני לאורך ימים. The words of the 23rd Psalm. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He maketh me to lie down in green pastures. He leadeth me beside the still waters. He restoreth my soul. He guideth me in straight paths for his name's sake. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for thou art with me. Thy rod and thy staff, they comfort me. Thou preparest a table before me in the presence of mine enemies. Thou hast anointed my head with oil, my cup runneth over. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I shall dwell in the house of the Lord forever. L'kol zman ve'et l'chol chefetz tachat hashamayim, et laledet ve'et lamut, et lata'at ve'et la'akor natuya, et lifrotz ve'et livnot, et livkot ve'et lischok. We learn from Ecclesiastes, for everything there is a season, a time for every experience under heaven, a time to be born and a time to die, a time to plant and a time to uproot what is planted, a time to tear down and a time to build up, a time to weep and a time to laugh, a time to grieve and a time to dance, a time to throw stones and a time to gather stones, a time to embrace and a time to refrain from embracing, a time to seek and a time to lose, a time to keep and a time to discard, a time to tear and a time to sow, a time to keep silence and a time to speak. These are the times that both make sense. When you feel like sitting in your silence, in your memories, and in your thoughts, and a time when talking and sharing stories of Richard bring peace and bring comfort. And I hope that you will share with the family your stories and your memories as his neshama, as his soul, continues to have an elevation closer and closer to God. The Yizkor prayer characterizes a father as Avi Mori, my father, my teacher. For tradition values, above all else, the father's role as the teacher of his children. As any textbook in education will tell you, teaching falls into two categories. The first, formal instruction, generally takes place in a classroom. It utilizes textbooks, blackboards, now whiteboards, audiovisual aids, and lectures. Its goal is the imparting of information. The second category is that of informal instruction. It has as its goal the imparting of values and character building. This form of education takes place to a great extent in the home. The medium of instruction is the life, the personality, and the words of the teacher. The outlook, the attitudes, and the value of the instructor, the father in this case, are conveyed to the pupils, his students, his children, in a variety of ways, some so subtle as to defy analysis. However, the result of the shaping of lives and of character in a way far more effective than is possible in a formal classroom. And Richard Weintraub was such a teacher, instilling principles, values, and a work ethic that lives on in his children, Perry, Sherry, and Craig, who along with their mates, Jill, Christy, and Ginny, remember and honor his memory today. We join in sorrow with his wife, Pam, his stepchildren, Brian and Andy, and his grandchildren, Ari and Daniel, Veronica, Ashley, Emily, and Dennis, who were truly the lights of Richard's life, bringing him joy and happiness as he was surrounded by their love. Richard, son of Saul and Bertha Weintraub, was born on March 18th, 1935, and he and his brother Stephen of blessed memory were raised in the Kinsman neighborhood, one of the Cowboys, where he graduated from John Adams High School after becoming a celebrity of sorts as the sports section journalist for the school paper. As was the norm back then, families were very closely knit, and his was no different. He, as did his father, grew up surrounded by cousins, aunts, and uncles, and their lives were intertwined by physical proximity, usually living on the same street, at times in the same house, and by the love that he received from his extended group of relatives. They became one big family. Holidays and Shabbos were special times with the family, and they were observed traditionally. Always included a Shabbat dinner with a warm challah, hot schmaltz, and grivenes. Richard's love of good, cholesterol-laden foods stayed with him throughout his life, and entertainment in his later years often consisted of weekly trips to the finest restaurants, preferably those with a happy hour and that served well-marbled steaks. Upon high school graduation, Richard enrolled in Ohio State University, where he planned to pursue his bachelor's degree. But after meeting his first wife, Gail, at a Kinsman Shaker social event, he fell in love, married her, and Perry was born shortly thereafter. He left OSU and worked in sales and at various businesses. He was a natural at sales. He was an incredibly hard worker who knew how to hustle, and he made it his life's goal to take care of and provide for his family and his children so he could be sure to make ends meet. With the blessing and arrival of Sherry and Craig soon after that, the drive to provide often found him traveling during the week for work and away on weekends, helping out a local builder. His hard work allowed him to move up and on financially and physically to Shaker and University Heights. Richard adored his children, and he loved spending time with them whenever possible. Perry recalled that he always looked up to his dad, admitting that he was really a cool guy. He remembered that his dad saved him from having to eat the dreaded chicken paprikash on Friday nights by stealing him away to a ball game or any ball game, anywhere, on any field, even in a sandlot, wherever he could find it, and he also attended every one of Perry's Little League games. Craig also mentioned that education was of utmost importance to his father, and the knowledge he imparted of how to get and stay motivated made a huge impression on his life. Sherry shared with me that her dad was always willing to give her advice and impressed upon her the importance of learning. He adored her children, called her by his pet name Cookie, and beamed with pride over her Irish husband, Christy. Family meant everything to him, that and his Cadillacs, his fancy sharp clothes, and dozens of neat and well-polished shoes. He was quite the fashionista for his time. After all the snowy years up north, Richard decided to move south to sunny Florida, and it was there that he met his third wife, Pam, on a blind date in 2002. After 10 years of togetherness, they decided to marry in 2012, and they enjoyed 6 mostly healthy and wonderful years of marriage. But Richard also maintained his close friendships with many of his old kinsman buddies who had also moved down to Florida, and they were quite comfortable with his dry, self-deprecating humor, his opinions, and his lack of a verbal filter. They played golf, they played poker, went fishing, and of course, loved following and attending the Tampa Rays baseball games. Tragically, Richard and Pam were involved in a very serious car crash on Valentine's Day this year, and while he recovered from his initial injuries, subsequent complications took their toll on his overall health, and he declined rapidly. He was afforded a few days of better health recently, days that he shared with his family, with Pam, with his children, Perry, Craig, and Sherry, until his death. Richard's passing leaves us sad at the thought of his unfinished years, but we are truly grateful for the wonderful memories he leaves behind of a fine, caring, and giving human being. We say, Lech b'shalom, go in peace, Richard Weintraub, for a life well lived and well loved. I'd like to invite now his son Perry to share a few of his memories with all of us.
My dad was my hero growing up. He was bigger than life to me. I looked up to him so much, had a really special closeness. It was already mentioned, baseball was a heck of a bond that we both had. He used to take me to baseball games, escape the baseball games. And that's probably why today baseball is still so special to me, because that was a heck of a bond that we had. He was gone a lot when we were young, but every time he came home, I was so glad to be with him and be around him. You know, somehow my dad and my mom survived my teenage years, and they got me out of trouble and jackpots numerous times. I did a lot of stupid and regrettable things in those years, and my dad always stuck by me, always on my side. When he asked me to come to work with him and join his business, I was unbelievably excited to be with him in business, and I was scared to death because I was Dick Weintraub's son, and to me that was a whole lot to live up to. Being in business those 8 years with him, I learned so much about life, and I got to experience so much with him. I just felt amazingly lucky to do that with my dad. I know this would have probably come as a shock to a lot of people, but my dad and I butted heads a lot, and just try to imagine two stubborn Weintraubs working together. It was quite a show. I'd go to industry trade shows with my dad, and we'd walk down those aisles, and everybody knew my dad. It was unbelievable. I was in amazement to watch my dad walk down these shows. And everybody knew him, he knew everybody. And I was so proud of him when I would see that. You know, I went through some pretty tough times in part of my life, and he never turned his back on me. He was always there. He was always there with words of wisdom and love and money sometimes. As I get older, I appreciate the sacrifices that he made for us. We could have, he made these sacrifices so that we could have a much better life than he ever had. I can't imagine the pressure that he felt as a kid of 20 having his own kid, and by the age of 26 he had 3 kids to take care of already. I really don't know how he did it. He was always very disciplined, very focused, and always talked about goals to me. No one ever gave him a thing. He worked his ass off for everything he earned and achieved in his life. And then just some random thoughts I had to close this out. My dad was a boater for a while, about 10 years, and they were his pride and joy when he'd go out on that boat on Lake Erie. In the first few years, he might have been the worst captain on Lake Erie. He couldn't dock the boat worth a damn. He would bump into boats and docks. Look out became the motto of the boat, basically. But he didn't give up, and he became a really good boatsman later on. And those were really fun years when we were all out on those boats. And it was mentioned he was a clothes nut when he was younger. He would go and buy the nicest clothes, Kilgore trout. He couldn't even afford half of probably what he bought, but he just wanted that. And, you know, and then the last thing that came to my mind was, and people that knew him well would understand this, his hair was always an important factor in a lot of different jokes and conversations. And if you knew him well enough, you'd understand why that was the case. He had a great sense of humor, and he loved to laugh. He loved his vodka, and he taught me that life isn't easy, but always to keep moving forward and never give up. And in my opinion, my dad's biggest achievement in life was being the father of 3 children who loved him dearly. And as far as I'm concerned, that's really all that matters in life. My heart is breaking now, and I miss him very much already. I am so blessed to have had you as my dad. I love you. Rest in peace.
Thank you. And Craig is going to share a few words as well.
So it's clear that he had an abundant life that was really filled with happiness, laughter, success, children, grandchildren. He survived 3 marriages, loved the kids in every marriage. Just, everybody meant so much to him, regardless of how marriages ended. And just great life for him. As the cantor stated, he started from very humble beginnings and learned what hard work was. He didn't have any advantages that were offered to him. He knew people that ultimately became extremely successful very fast, those that grew up in the Kinsman area. One of his good friends was Carl Milstein. And he idolized Carl, and Carl took him under his wing for a little while. But as Perry said, my dad, at a very young age, had children, which was not uncommon back then. And by the time he was 26 and my mom was 24, they had 3 children. So it required quick maturity on his part. And my dad, fortunately, was always mindful of being successful. He would never settle on mediocrity. And he instilled that in all of us. In me in particular, in my teen years, he instilled to be goal-oriented and confident with no matter what I did, whatever I chose, but have goals and be confident that you can do it. And his motto to me when I was a teen and throughout college and even recently was always have a positive mental attitude no matter what the circumstances were. It's how he lived his life. And so having a positive mental attitude also meant that we would have to test his positive mental attitude, which we put him through many tests. And I was thinking about it, and I can recall there was an instance when I was a kid. My dad loved sports, and he was a baseball player when he was younger. And he thought that I could become a good pitcher. So we're in the backyard of our house, and he's teaching me different pitches, the knuckleball, the curveball, the fastball. And I got him down in a catcher's crouch, and I was working on my pitches. Unfortunately, he had called for a knuckleball and had placed his glove up here, and I threw a fastball that he wasn't wearing a cup. And that ended our situation with baseball. And I asked him, Dad, how's your positive mental attitude now? And so he, and he lived his life that way. He was really very self-deprecating. Here was a guy that bought a house in University Heights that had a pool, and then he bought 2 boats. So over the 70s and 80s, he was constantly around water, but he never, ever learned to swim. It was fascinating to me, and it was kind of a running joke. In my opinion, and as Perry mentioned, the only thing that I ever saw float when my dad got in the water was his hairpiece. It was unbelievable. He would get in there and that thing would just start to swim on its own. If that piece could talk, the stories that it could tell would be much better than I could. But I will convey one story, which was just, it was my dad. My dad can be kind of klutzy. And I'll never forget, I teased him. He was cleaning the pool in the backyard. This is in the mid-'70s, late 70s. And we had a puppy. And I thought it would be a nice practical joke. He didn't have his hairpiece on. So I gave the puppy his hairpiece. And the puppy is running around the backyard with the hairpiece while my dad's cleaning the pool. And he's like, what the hell is that? It looked like a big tarantula in the dog's mouth. He freaked out. He's running around the pool, chasing the dog. My mom is back there. We're laughing hysterically. And he tripped and fell in the pool. For a guy that can't swim, boy, was he pissed. And it was really just, that was him. And he could take he could take the joke that I delivered, and I loved doing that. In fact, Perry and I, when we were down there a few years ago, we snuck into his bedroom and we found the piece on top of like a fake head. And it was great because my dad is in the other room and I had Perry put on the piece. And he's walking around acting like my dad, and he comes out with his big bad attitude. He's got the piece on, and my dad loved it. He was just hysterical. It was terrific. I took a lot of visits down to Florida. He moved down there about 20 years ago. And we tried playing golf together. And I would try to be as patient as possible, but I remember the last time we played, after like the fifth shot out of the sand, his fifth shot in the sand, he kept hitting it back into the sand. I turned my back and said, "Dad, just do me a favor and throw it onto the green." And we ended up having a bunch of drinks afterwards, and we said that will be his last round with me. He was, my dad was a father figure to a lot of people. Mark Buck in particular. Mark Buck was a work colleague of my father's. They started at Waxman Industries, and then they continued on in their relationship. And Mark lived in Florida and was very close to my dad. And Mark and Diane took special care of him when he was sick. The other person that my dad, I thought, was a father figure to was my friend Danny Weissman. And there were times where I would think my dad loved Danny more than me. Danny was getting invited to more football games and basketball games than I was. It was like Danny would tell me he had a great time with my dad. It was just unbelievable. My dad was a prolific writer. He started writing when he was young and wrote for the school newspaper. And I have countless letters that he wrote to me when I was in college. And he continued, was amazed by my success and cherished those letters. Very important to me. Sherry, Perry, and I would make a lot of visits down to Florida and enjoy our time with Pam, Brian, Andy, go to dinner. It really just was very, very special. We went down there every year for his birthday, and he was just so happy. My dad, in general, was just a very supportive, loving, and disciplined person. He was reliable, and he was always there for sage advice from me. His favorite expression was, "We'll cross that bridge when we get to it." And he said to me Friday, right before he died, he goes, "I'm crossing the bridge." I told him, "I'll see you."
Thank you for sharing your stories with us. I'm sorry I didn't know about the hairpiece yesterday. I can envision that tarantula. It's quite a story. And as I had mentioned at the beginning, these are the memories that we need to share. These are the stories that you continue to tell when you were kids together, when you knew him as an adult, so that his soul will always be the light to his family and to all of you, and to achieve that goal of being closer to God. With Job we say, Adonai Natan, God, you have given. You gave us a loved one who will not be forgotten. For all that was good and enduring in his life, we offer the deepest thanks of our hearts. Adonai Lakach, God, now you have taken away. We pray for the strength to turn our broken hearts into an altar of trust, before which we acknowledge your sovereignty and love, as we now say, Yehi Shem Adonai Mevorach, blessed be the name of God, now and forever. Ask all who are able to please rise for El Malei Rachamim. El Malei Rachamim, Shochen Bamramim, Hametzeh Menucha Nechona, Tachat Kanfei Shechina, Im Kedoshim Utehorim, Kezahar Harakia Mazirim, Et Nishmat Reuven Shalach Le'olamo, Bal Rachamim Yastirehu Beseter Kanafav Le'olamim, Vitzro HaChaim Et Nishmato, Adonai Hu Nachalato, V'yanuach B'shalom Al Mishkavo, V'nomar Amen. Compassionate God, eternal Spirit of the universe, grant perfect rest in your sheltering presence to Richard Weintraub, son of Sidney and Bertha, who has entered eternity. O God of mercy, let him find refuge in your eternal presence, and let his soul be bound up in the bond of everlasting life. God is his inheritance. May he rest in peace. And let us all say, Amen. This concludes our service here. You may be seated. We will continue at Mount Olive Cemetery for the interment.